Welcome to this deep dive. You know, we always love getting your suggestions, and this one is really interesting.
Right.
It's all about Zimbabwe's lithium industry, and it's easy to see why people are paying attention. Not just another mining boom, this is the kind of thing that shifts global power dynamics, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Clean energy is the name of the game now, and a country that used to be overlooked is suddenly holding all the cards. So we've got some excerpts here from a YouTube video titled Captain Traore Backs Zimbabwe's Lithium Embargo Europe Running Out of Options. And it's from a channel called The New Tourist.
Okay, cool.
They really get into how Zimbabwe's lithium reserves are changing the whole game.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic for sure.
What parts of this video really stood out to you?
Well, it's pretty amazing how one single resource can reshape the entire global landscape, like lithium.
Right.
It's basically the 21st century's version of oil.
I see that.
And Zimbabwe just happens to be sitting on a massive reserve of it. Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Right. The video really paints a picture of a world that's desperate for lithium.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the key ingredient in electric car batteries and renewable energy storage, of course. And demand is skyrocketing while the traditional suppliers like Australia and Chile are running into all sorts of roadblocks.
Right.
It's like the perfect storm is brewing.
It is.
So Zimbabwe really steps in at the perfect moment.
They do. They have one of the largest untapped lithium reserves on the planet.
Wow.
And it's this really high quality type called spodumene,
Okay.
which makes it perfect for those powerful EV batteries everyone wants.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's like hitting the jackpot.
Yeah.
Especially with the way the world is shifting away from fossil fuels.
The video also talks about how we were so reliant on fossil fuels for over a century.
Oh, yeah.
That came at a huge cost to the planet with climate change.
But of course, we're seeing the effects of that everywhere.
Right. So governments and corporations are scrambling now to switch to renewable energy.
Absolutely.
And that means they need lithium more than ever.
Yes, lithium is absolutely essential for things like EVs and large-scale battery storage systems.
Right.
The kinds of things that can help power entire cities with clean energy.
It's a huge shift.
It is, and the demand for lithium is only going up.
How much is it projected to increase?
Well, we're talking a potential 5-fold increase by 2050.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's huge.
It's not just business anymore, it's a complete shift in global power.
I agree.
For the first time in modern history, control over resources isn't just about oil,
Right.
it's about lithium.
Yeah, it's a whole new game.
So for years, we've had these three major players in lithium:
Right.
Australia, Chile, and China.
Yeah, they pretty much controlled almost all of the global lithium supply.
Then things started to change, didn't they?
They did. Things got a lot more complicated.
How so?
Well, you had Australia mining it, Chile getting it from their salt flats, and China refining and processing most of it. So China was the one turning it into the form that can actually be used in batteries.
Interesting.
But then a bunch of global disruptions really shook things up.
Oh yeah, like what?
Think COVID-19 for one.
Uh-huh.
That really threw a wrench in everything.
Supply chains were disrupted all over the place.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you had governments in lithium-rich countries starting to change their policies.
Okay.
They were pushing for stricter mining regulations
That's it.
to benefit their own countries more.
Makes sense.
So you started seeing higher taxes, new regulations, and limits on foreign companies. It made it way harder for Western nations to get their hands on reliable lithium deals.
So things were already getting more difficult, and then you add rising geopolitical tensions and resource nationalism into the mix.
Oh yeah, that just threw even more fuel on the fire.
Right, so it became pretty obvious that the old system wasn't sustainable anymore.
It just wasn't working.
And Australia, which was a real powerhouse in the mining world, was dealing with a bunch of challenges too, right? The video talks about stricter environmental laws there, rising extraction costs, and shifting political priorities.
Altruism.
It makes lithium mining in Australia more expensive and complicated than ever before.
Right. It's not the easy win it used to be.
So all those Western companies that were used to a reliable and cheap lithium supply are now facing a new reality.
They are. Lithium prices are going up, regulations are getting tighter.
And the supply they once relied on isn't guaranteed.
Exactly.
And then there's China.
Oh yeah, China's been playing the long game here.
They've been quietly building an empire in the lithium industry.
They have. While other countries were focused on just getting lithium out of the ground, China was busy figuring out what to do with it next.
So China processes about 60% of the world's lithium, right?
That's right.
They turn that raw material into the battery-grade metal that powers everything from our phones to electric cars.
It's a huge advantage for them.
It is. Even if lithium is mined somewhere else, there's a good chance it'll still have to go through China before it becomes useful. And this is a big concern for Western governments that are already wary of China's influence on global trade.
It's a major point of tension.
What about the US and Europe? How are they responding to all of this?
Well, the United States wants to limit China's tech influence.
Okay.
They've started cutting off Chinese battery and semiconductor companies, and they're pushing for new supply chains that don't rely on Beijing.
So they're trying to diversify.
They are. They want to reduce their dependence on China.
And Europe?
Europe is in a tricky spot.
How so?
They rely on China for about 98% of their lithium.
Wow, that's a huge
It
dependency.
is. So they're desperately searching for new sources of lithium that don't come with all the political headache.
Sources they can trust.
Exactly.
And that's where Zimbabwe enters
Right.
the
For
picture.
decades, it was barely on the radar when it came to global energy.
It was known for other minerals, gold, diamonds, platinum.
But not
Yeah.
lithium.
Zimbabwe was dealing with its own
They
set
were.
of issues.
Political instability, economic struggles, and Western sanctions.
That made it really hard for them to attract
It
investment.
did. It was a tough cycle to break.
But now everything has changed.
Yeah. They're sitting on one of the largest untapped lithium reserves in the world.
Wow, and the world suddenly can't afford to ignore
That
them.
anymore?
So now we have companies from China, the US, and Europe all trying to get a piece of the action in Zimbabwe.
It's a real scramble.
They know that to win the global energy race, they need what Zimbabwe
They
has.
do. And the kind of lithium found in Zimbabwe is mostly in the form of spodumene, which is like the top choice for making high-quality lithium hydroxide. The specific type used in high-performance EV batteries and energy storage grids.
Ah, so it's the good
It is.
stuff. And these lithium-rich areas in Zimbabwe are concentrated in a few key spots,
You
right?
have Bakita, Arcadia, Zulu, and Kamativi.
It sounds like these once overlooked places are about to become the next battlegrounds in the fight to control these resources.
absolutely.
And for Zimbabwe, this is a huge turning point.
It is. They've struggled for years to find their footing in the global economy.
Because of sanctions from Western nations, political instability, inflation, and economic
Right,
mismanagement.
it was tough.
But now they have lithium, which is shaping the future.
It's a resource that the world can't afford to overlook.
A decade ago, nobody would have guessed that Zimbabwe would be a key player in the race for clean energy.
Not a chance.
But as global superpowers rush to lock in lithium deals, Zimbabwe is no longer on the
They're
sideline.
front and center.
And they have leverage.
Oh, yeah. They're holding all the cards.
Especially with Europe so desperate for
Europe
lithium.
needs Zimbabwe's lithium more than Zimbabwe needs Europe right now.
It's a real flip of the
It is.
script. For years, it was African nations that were dependent on Western investment and trade
Now the
deals.
tables have turned.
Europe needs to negotiate on Zimbabwe's
Too, and
terms.
Zimbabwe isn't just selling minerals.
It's about rewriting the rules.
Exactly.
So Zimbabwe made a big move by banning the export of unprocessed lithium.
That was a bold move.
They're not just letting companies take the raw materials
Right,
anymore.
they're forcing foreign investors to build refining and processing facilities within Zimbabwe.
Wow, that changes everything.
It does, it raises the stakes.
Now, the question isn't just whether Zimbabwe can supply lithium.
It's whether this will actually transform their economy or just be another missed opportunity.
It's a good question.
It is. History shows us that having valuable resources doesn't always lead to prosperity.
Yeah, you have countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and
They
Venezuela.
have tons of precious minerals, but they've struggled with corruption and exploitation.
And instead of boosting their economies, those resources often fueled instability.
Exactly.
So what makes Zimbabwe think they can do things
Well, they're
different?
trying to break the cycle. They're
How?
demanding that companies refine the lithium inside the country to create
Okay.
more high-value lithium carbonate and lithium hydroxide, which are key ingredients for those EV batteries. So it's not just about getting more money per ton of lithium. This
Right.
is about creating jobs in Zimbabwe, boosting local industries, and keeping more wealth circulating within their economy instead of it all going overseas.
It's a smart strategy.
It is, if they can pull it off.
But is refining lithium enough?
That's the big question, isn't it? Right now,
Big.
Africa is one of the world's richest sources of lithium.
Right.
Yet there are no major battery manufacturing plants anywhere on the continent.
Really?
It's true. China,
Wow.
Japan, South Korea, and the US dominate that industry.
So every electric car, smartphone, and renewable energy storage system depends on these batteries, but Africa isn't involved in making
Not yet.
them. So Zimbabwe has a chance to
They
change
do
that.
if they can attract the right investments, create smart partnerships, and build a battery industry of their own.
They could become a major supplier not just of lithium, but of the batteries that power
Absolutely.
everything.
Imagine a Zimbabwe that not only exports lithium,
But also manufactures the batteries that power electric vehicles and renewable energy grids all over Africa and beyond.
exactly, it wouldn't just bring in more revenue.
It would create high-paying jobs, drive innovation, and position Zimbabwe as a leader in Africa's clean energy
It's a
revolution.
huge opportunity.
What would it take to achieve that?
Well, it will be challenging, but they have one major advantage right now:
Which is
global competition.
Mhm.
Powerful countries are racing to secure lithium supplies, and Zimbabwe is at the center of it all.
So they're caught between China, which is already heavily invested, and Europe, which is trying to reduce its reliance on
Right, the
China.
delicate balancing act.
But how does that work to Zimbabwe's
It
advantage?
gives them the ability to set their own terms.
Oh,
In the past, African nations were often pressured into unfair trade deals.
forced to accept whatever was
Exactly.
offered. But with both China and Europe eager to get their lithium, Zimbabwe can negotiate from a
They
position
have
of
the leverage.
strength. So potentially they could use this to secure better prices, attract infrastructure
And build
investments,
long-term economic stability.
something that's been hard for other resource-rich African
It has
countries to
been.
do. And the shift isn't just about lithium. It exposes a deeper truth that Western nations haven't really acknowledged for a long
It does.
time.
What do you mean? For decades, Africa's role has been to provide raw materials, while the
Right.
profits and the high-tech manufacturing have happened elsewhere.
And the benefits haven't always trickled
Exactly.
down. But now that illusion is crumbling. With lithium in such high demand, Western nations are forced to face
Their
reality.
clean energy goals depend on Africa.
And this time they can't hide behind corporate deals or one-sided trade
No,
policies.
they need to negotiate openly and as equals.
This is a turning point for Zimbabwe and maybe even for Africa
It
as
really
a
could
whole.
be.
So it seems like Zimbabwe is at a real
You say
cross. They
I
have this amazing opportunity, but there are also risks involved. What do you think will happen next? What are some of the key things we should be watching for?
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch this power shift play out. And it's not just about who controls the lithium. It's about who gets to control the narrative.
That's a good point. You're right. For a long time, the story of Africa has been told from an outsider's
Yeah.
perspective. It's often focused on the challenges
Exactly.
and struggles.
And that narrative has been used to justify unequal trade relationships and maintain a sense of Western dominance.
Uh-huh. But when it comes to lithium, that narrative is being challenged.
It is, and the challenge is coming from within Africa itself.
Like Zimbabwe taking control of its own
Yeah, making sure it
resources.
benefits from their value.
It's like they're rewriting the script in
They
real
are.
time.
And a key turning point was their decision to ban the export of unprocessed lithium,
Oh, right. For years, Zimbabwe had been exporting raw
which is
lithium
essentially
ore.
giving away the most valuable part of the resource.
I can see how that makes sense long term, but wouldn't they make more money in the short term by just selling all the lithium they could
Maybe.
mine?
But the government recognized that real economic transformation wouldn't come from just digging stuff up and shipping it out. They knew
Right.
they needed to move up the value chain.
So by banning the export of unprocessed lithium, they're forcing companies to invest in setting up refining and processing facilities inside
Exactly,
Zimbabwe.
and that's where things get really interesting.
That's how
By processing the lithium domestically, Zimbabwe keeps a much larger share of the profits, creates higher skilled jobs, and develops expertise that will benefit them in the future.
So it's about building a sustainable
It is.
industry.
It's like the difference between selling a plain apple versus a delicious apple pie.
I
You
like
get a lot
that
more
analogy.
value if you control the whole process.
Right, and Zimbabwe's ambitions
Oh
go
yeah,
even
they want to
further.
become a hub for battery manufacturing in Africa.
Oh wow. So instead of shipping refined lithium off to other countries to make batteries, they could do it all right there in
That's the
Zimbabwe.
ultimate goal.
That would be
It would be
huge.
they have the raw materials, They're developing the processing capacity, and they're in a region where demand for batteries is only going to increase.
It seems like they're in a really good
They are,
position.
but the video also mentions there are some big challenges ahead too.
Oh,
Well,
like
building a
what?
battery manufacturing industry takes a ton of investment, technological know-how, and access to global markets.
And there's also that tug of war happening between China and the West,
Exactly,
right?
when it comes to foreign investment in Zimbabwe's lithium sector.
China has been investing heavily in Zimbabwe's mining sector for years.
They've been securing access to lithium resources and establishing a strong presence.
And that's made some Western nations
It has.
nervous.
They're concerned about China's growing influence across Africa.
So now they're trying to catch up by offering their own investment deals
Right,
and
it's a bit of a
partnerships.
competition.
So Zimbabwe has to walk a tightrope
They do,
here.
balancing their relationship with China with their desire to attract investment from the West.
How do you see that playing
It's a
out?
balancing act, but it's also a huge opportunity. If
Okay.
they play their cards right, Zimbabwe could use this competition to their advantage.
By negotiating better deals, attracting more investment.
And ultimately gaining more control over their own future.
The stakes are high, but so are the potential
That's for sure.
rewards. And the video also points out how for decades Africa has been stuck
Of
in
providing
this
raw materials, while the profits and the benefits of high-tech manufacturing mostly go elsewhere.
It's a pattern that Zimbabwe and many other African nations are trying
They
to
are,
break.
and lithium could be the key.
They brought up the example of the Democratic Republic
Right,
of
a
Congo.
country with a lot of mineral wealth, but has struggled with poverty and instability.
It's a reminder that having resources doesn't automatically guarantee a
You
good
need
outcome.
planning, smart policies, and a real commitment to transparency and good governance.
So can Zimbabwe learn from these past mistakes? Can they actually capitalize on this lithium boom and build a better future?
It's a question with no easy answer.
It feels like there's a lot riding
There
on
is,
this.
for Zimbabwe, it's not just about lithium, it's about reclaiming their place in the global economy.
Right.
It's about rewriting the narrative about Africa and building a future where their resources benefit their own people.
It's a powerful
It is.
story. This story is still unfolding, but it has the potential to be a truly transformative one. Zimbabwe seems to be at a crossroads, facing several paths
Yeah,
forward.
it really does feel like they could go in a lot of different directions from here.
Oh, absolutely. Each path comes with its own set of opportunities and risks. You know, one path could lead to Zimbabwe becoming a global hub for lithium processing and battery manufacturing.
That would be incredible.
Yeah, that would create new jobs, attract more investment, and really transform their economy.
That would
You
be
know?
amazing to see.
It would, but there are also paths that could lead to more exploitation of resources, environmental damage, or increased inequality.
A lot
right?
will depend on the choices they make, both within their own country and in how they engage with global partners.
So what are some of the key things they need to focus on domestically?
Well, creating a stable and transparent investment climate is really important. They also need to build a skilled workforce and ensure that the benefits of lithium mining are shared fairly among the population. If they
Makes
don't
sense.
address those issues, the lithium boom could end up benefiting only a small elite, and that wouldn't be good for anyone.
And what about their relationships with global partners? What should we be looking
That's a
for there?
crucial piece of the puzzle. Zimbabwe needs to be strategic in its partnerships. They need to choose partners who align with their long-term development goals and who respect their sovereignty.
Partners they
Exactly.
can
It's
trust.
about finding collaborators, not just companies that want to extract resources and leave.
So it's a complex situation, but also a really exciting one. Zimbabwe has a real chance to forge a new path, not just for themselves, but potentially for the whole continent.
I agree. That's what makes this whole deep dive so fascinating. It's not just about lithium. It's about the potential for real change, the possibility of a more equitable and sustainable future for Zimbabwe and maybe for Africa as a whole.
And this story is just getting started. Who knows what will happen
Exactly.
next?
We're seeing a huge shift in the global
Yeah.
balance of power, and Africa, with its resources and young population, is poised to play a much bigger role going forward. It's a story full of potential, but also full of challenges.
But from what we've learned so far, Zimbabwe has a history of resilience and overcoming challenges. They've faced a lot of adversity in
They
the
have,
past.
with the right choices, the right partnerships, and maybe a bit of luck, they have a chance to write a whole new chapter one that benefits the entire nation.
It's definitely a story worth following closely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you found it as insightful as we did.